Almost there.
You winding up the.
All right, we're live. We're live. All right, everyone. Welcome to this discussion today. We've got Isaiah Jackson, author of Bitcoin and Black America, and Aleks Svetski, founder of Amber.io. So, guys, I wanted to bring you together today because obviously, well, there's no shortage of things to discuss in the world, and we're in these, unprecedented times where so much is kicking off, and there's so much emotion being stirred up, whether it's due to lockdowns, whether it's due to other movements. And I know we're all fairly opinionated, but I like to think we're all also, our highest priority is understanding the truth of a matter and trying to determine the best way to move forward productively. And so, I know, Aleks, you've been critical of what, kind of the response to the BLM movement. I've expressed some of my criticisms. You've obviously chimed in various respects. And so I thought it'd be fun just today to, get together and have that conversation that doesn't seem to be able to be had in the media for fears of being canceled or being labeled this or that. And so and of course, I'm always trying to refine my perspective and understand things better. And so I just wanted to have a chat today. So maybe Zay, we'll start with you. Just, brief introduction to yourself. Aleks, then we'll do you, and then we'll get kicked off.
Do it. Oh, yeah. So I'm Isaiah, author of Bitcoin and Black America, also co-host of the Gentleman of Crypto, and, been in the space 7 years, since 2013 with Bitcoin. And of course, with a lot of the movements going on, can't wait to discuss why Black Lives Matter is such a shitty organization.
Awesome. My turn, or?
Yeah, it's you.
All right. It's fucking great. Okay. Well, how can I say? Outspoken, toxic, misogynist. I'm trying to think of all the words people call me. Asshole, and all of these sorts of categories, which I embrace. Thank you very much. But look, my background's mostly been entrepreneurial. All throughout my life, I've built businesses, many failures, some successes, lots of battle scars. Really discovered Bitcoin much later than Zay, I guess. 2016 for me was the real genesis. I mean, I was a gold bug in 2011, 2012, 2013, and obviously Bitcoin came across my radar and I instantly dismissed it. A lot of people know my genesis story, so so since 2016, I like to, because I've got I was very academically strong when I was younger, so I digest information very quickly and was good with math and physics and history and all sorts of shit. So coming into Bitcoin, what's kept me enthralled is how many disciplines or how many areas of interest it touches. And for me, that's really, really powerful. So I came at it with not only an entrepreneurial mission through Amber, trying to help people accumulate Bitcoin, but more importantly with a philosophical mission, because I think at least I have a way of writing and potentially a way of speaking that can get across to some people. So I've tried to put that to good use. And on Twitter, I come off a lot more toxic, to say the least. So yeah, opinionated Bitcoiner, entrepreneur. That's me.
Right. And Aleks, I know you've expressed your opinion on the BLM movement recently, whether it was at conferences or just on Twitter, and you've gotten some backlash for it. And I think many people who have expressed some degree of criticism have received the same. And my take on it is, and this applies generally, it doesn't really matter what the issue is today in society, is that we seem to have gone away from prioritizing accuracy and data and truth, and we seem to be acting from almost pure emotion and impulse. And at least that's the way it seems to be framed, that these are the reactions we seem to be getting, and things aren't put in the proper context, things aren't given the proper nuance to understand. If we're going to find legitimate solutions to any problem, we have to understand what the actual causes are. And if we don't have those conversations about what the causes are, then we're doomed to not only not finding solutions, but probably creating other problems as well. And so I think, with what's happened, first of all, obviously, what happens to anyone who's the victim of police brutality, anyone who's the victim of the abuse of power, black, white, male, female, whatever the fuck, it's horrible. And that is a problem. And we should find solutions to that. To the degree that any group of people, as divided by sex, skin color, ideology, social status, whatever, are more victimized by that, that's bad too. But it's a matter of degree, not a material difference between the two, in my opinion. And so, I'd like to discuss, Zay, maybe you can get us kicked off on this, but there's been so much emotion, there's been so much energy around this movement. And obviously that's been manifested in peaceful protests, in non-peaceful protests, and riots, etc. And, I really wish all this energy could be directed towards attacking the root cause. And I know we'll get into this, but imagine if this level of vigor and energy was devoted to what I'm sure we mutually believe is would be the most effective lever of a solution in adopting and engaging in Bitcoin. What if all that energy and all that press and all that media were devoted to that? So, Zay, where do you think, you said you disagree with the BLM movement. Where do you think this has gone wrong in light of recent events?
Oh yeah, so Black Lives Matter, the statement is valid, but the organization itself has been co-opted by people who have nothing to do and have no solutions for Black people, in my opinion, long term. If you look at their website, what they believe in, what they're striving for, zero economic pillars to stand on there. And when the smoke clears, because people have been protesting for years, my grandmother was protesting, there was no economic solution that came about. So they're going to be doing the same thing in the next few years. And, the start of Black Lives Matter was funded by George Soros and his people, whoever they are, and who knows exactly what their goal is. Of course, the division that happens and a lot of the riots and protests we've seen, the media, they don't have any nuance because they got to spit something out in 4 minutes or 8 minutes. So they don't really have any nuance in their argument. So what you're seeing is a mixture of a few things, in my opinion. People are angry because economically they may not have money based on, the COVID crisis. Then you have other groups who Antifa or whoever else is out there. You have peaceful protesters, and then you have, a lot of young kids, which I think people fail to realize. You watch a lot of the videos of the damage and destruction. It's a bunch of 17-year-old kids with skateboards almost every time, and they don't have anything to do. They're not in school, and the recourse for it is pretty much non-existent. So I think this movement, while it does say Black Lives Matter on it, is not really a Black movement because there is no economic strategy to it. And a lot of the Black people that I talk to in my age range and younger are focused on the economic side, and they're confused. They're like, what is this Black? They're not doing anything for us. They haven't really done anything. And in 4 years, a lot of their leaders, it seems like more of a movement for the LGBTQ community than it is for Black people. So, which is fine as well, but that's not a solution long term. And I think we'll get into it economically, how Bitcoin can help. But I think the movement has been co-opted. This is not a Black movement.
Can I ask you one question about that? Just, you started by saying like the sentiment or the statement Black Lives Matter is valid, but the movement has been co-opted or whatever. What in your mind is the benefit of distinguishing, one group of people based on whatever the primary difference between themselves and another group is? What do you think the benefit of distinguishing a problem solely based on a group identity versus a broader problem that affects everyone, albeit to varying degrees?
Right. Well, it's actually just good marketing. So by saying Black Lives Matter, yeah. If somebody said White Lives Matter, yeah. If somebody said Asian Lives, yeah. Like, okay, these are valid statements, but it's just marketing. They marketed to play on the emotions of Black people who have for years felt like they've been disenfranchised. And when people get emotional, they break things and yell and scream, and then nothing actually gets done. So that is unfortunate. But yeah, it's a statement that is valid, but so are the other ones. So it's just good marketing.
Yeah, because I feel like it's more than likely that if we frame a problem as afflicting one, exclusively one or predominantly one group of people, then the solutions that we focus on and devise will be catered to them. When the problem is broad, it just may impact different groups differently. But if we fix the core problem, we would probably get resolution across groups. Alex, what's your take?
Yeah, I was writing some notes before we kicked off, and I don't know where to start because I've got so many different notes and so many different angles I want to approach this from. I think the biggest one for me is where I generally have a problem with movements that become memes. Whether it was Me Too before this, Black Lives Matter, and before that it was, LGBT fucking whatever other letter is on there these days. Whatever it is, feminists and this or that. Like we begin to remove personal agency and responsibility, and we apply protectionism as a way to solve the problem for an imaginary collective. And in the process of doing that, we weaken the real individuals that the collective and society is made up of. And it comes back to this notion of if you're trying to build a society and you're trying to build the constituents, i.e. the people of the society, you've got a choice. Do you build protection or do you build strength? Do you want to make society full of soft people or full of hard people? And I know this kind of sounds non-related, but it is fundamentally related, because as soon as we start to introduce identity politics, we use the collective as a way to not only hide behind memes and banners that everyone then can easily co-opt, whether it's fucking fake brands like Nike or whoever else is now all of a sudden going to feed you BLM bullshit every time you open an app, or whether it's people then taking anybody that's outside of that group and instantly ascribing to them a set of values that the individuals who may not be, skin color black, for example, or gender fucking with a penis, or whatever the outside group is at this point in time, we automatically ascribe them values that the individuals that you're pointing at may not even fucking have. And that's the kind of stuff that generally makes me angry. I kind of said in the article that I wrote, I don't really have a horse in this race. I mean, look at me, I ain't white. I've probably got Arab blood and whatever sort of mix in me. I don't really give a shit about that stuff. And it's really funny because I grew up in an area which was really rough, kind of next to the projects. And I grew up with a school full of Samoans and Tongans and Islanders, who all sort of behaved like they were fucking Bloods and Crips and whatever they thought they were. But and people, hung out with their own groups. I hung out with the Lebos, with the Arabs, and with the Italians and all that sort of shit. So we had our little group. We called ourselves, we were the Wogs, and then you had the Skaties, who were like the Aussies, and all that sort of stuff. And there was a natural, convergence of people who might have had similar cultural or similar, national upbringing. They were their own fucking race, and they hung out together. But we never really, had major problems. Yeah, we had fucking scuffles, and then we'd have fights, but it was never really, there was never really a problem of racism. I used to call my Italian friends spaghettis, call my Greek friends souvlakis. I'd call my fucking my Islander friends, what do you call it, fucking soles, or all sorts. We'd all call each other names. Now these days, through the institutionalization of group identity, now any kind of word, any kind of phrase, any kind of speech, any kind of opinion becomes demonized, because we've infused politics into every we've infused politics into speech, and it's so fucking deadly because now, like, nobody can say anything. Everyone's a victim on some marginal fucking level. You know, everyone can wave the victim flag, or, you know, everyone can wave the I'm offended flag or I'm outraged flag. And it's just this complete mess. And there's no more, we've lost all the signal. Everyone's just fucking screaming about shit, and, you know, we no longer know why. And I don't know. I didn't make a clear point there, I don't think. But I think for me, the institutionalization and the focus on the collective over the individual, I think, is where a lot of the problem stems from, first and foremost. Because, like I said, you can ascribe an identity to somebody who's part of something that they look like they're a part of, without appreciating that the individual may be completely different, yada, 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 yada. Mm-hmm. And I just think that that's a path to continually fighting amongst each other, as opposed to finding ways to cooperate and be better. And, you know, the second part of that Why Liberty Matters article that I'm writing right now talks about, you know, getting in touch again with a society that is built not on politics but on economics, because economics, and we'll get into this further as we go, but economics at its very core is purely the study of how humans allocate time and energy, and time and energy are fundamentally don't know what race, gender, fucking religion, culture, or any of that shit is. The time and energy are two fixed constants. It's the two things we share. Everything else we can go and be different about. But when you take the ability to oppress or offend or victimize or whatever we want to frame, based on these imaginary collectives, and, you know, we start working on an even ground, on a set of rules that we all agree to, which is, you know, purely raw economic rules, and is where Bitcoin fixes a lot of these things. Is we can turn a chapter and move away from having to make big things out of shit like racism. Because I think, I'm even writing another article saying that racism is a fucking perfectly normal anthropological phenomenon, and it's been with us since the beginning of time, and it'll always be with us. But when you take the when you de-weaponize it by depoliticizing it, it no longer becomes a problem at the individual level. So anyway, lots of things in there we can touch on, but I'll kill my rant here so you can.
Well, Alex, I'll ask you one question about that. You know, you mentioned kind of the tendency toward collective identification and behavior rather than individual. And aside from whatever political forces may wish to see the governed divided, let's shelve that one for a sec. And why do you think individuals buy into collective and group identities and associations rather than seeing themselves as individuals?
I think it's partly education, or it might even be primarily education these days. There's a level of convenience in it. You know, it's easier to stand in than to stand out. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, in society, and particularly the more prosperous society gets, the more you're afraid to lose versus being inspired to gain. And, you know, the individual, like being an individual by definition is, you know, more risky than being in a group or in a collective. And that doesn't mean, like, you know, some people confuse individualism with, oh yeah, we're all fucking every man for himself and complete anarchy. Like, that's not how it works, right? Is, you know, people can voluntarily, you know, come together and build collective on shared values. There's nothing wrong with that. Individuals can do that. The problem is when we create a institution out of a collective and give it a moral, ethical, economic high ground that the individuals within it don't get. And then, or even and then particularly the individuals outside of that collective completely get fucking disowned. Like a perfect example is in Burma, right? You've got the Buddhists, quote unquote Buddhists, who run the country, and they literally fucking rape, burn, torture and kill the Myanmar Muslims in there, the Rohingyas. Why? They're the same fucking people, but different label, different collective, and they fucking torture and kill them. Like, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And that's the threat of institutionalizing collectivism, and that I think is a very dangerous problem, and we've seen it in every single shade, from socialism to communism to religionism to fucking everything. It's a problem.
I agree with that, and I think one of the problems that probably preceded the issues that you just referred to, and that I think we're dealing with in culture in the West broadly today, and this has been said by several people, but if the ideas can't go to battle, then the people generally do. And we're in a society and culture now where, in mainstream media and thought, there's an incredible narrowing of accepted discourse. And as a result, certain ideas and people that espouse those ideas are marginalized simply because they're expressing an opinion that's counter to the dominant narrative. And as a result of that, we can't smash ideas together. We can't have these discussions. And if we can't have the ideas do battle, people generally do. And I think we're seeing manifestations of that all around the world today. Zay, did you have anything to add to what Aleks has just kind of touched on?
Yeah, I was going to say your last statement saying that if we don't have a marketplace of ideas, that people go to war. Definitely, because I feel like most people are soft as shit. They don't really say what's on their mind, especially on TV. Even if they do say what they think is right, they still get vilified for it later. And I would rather people, like for instance, in the Black community, a lot of people think you're supposed to talk really nice to us and be like, walk on eggshells. In reality, I would much rather somebody who is racist to say that up front. Then we can discuss it. I like people to be themselves, because a lot of the undercover little snarky liberal shit that I see is like it's almost like Black people are too helpless. We can't do anything for ourselves. We'll take care of you like a pet dog, and it's very insulting. And anyways, I think a lot of companies that have virtue signaled the last few weeks, same thing. It's like the marketplace of ideas. You can't really say anything, so they're just going to come out and say what's popular to make a buck. So you got to have the ability to sit down and talk about ideas, even if you disagree. At the end of the day, getting it off your chest and just saying it is much better than just pent up, I hate these people, I hate this idea, and then acting on it later. So definitely need to introduce a marketplace of ideas.
I just want to say I really appreciate you saying that, bro, because like, fuck me, like that for me, I come off as abrasive and arrogant sometimes, but like I have a saying in life, which is I'd rather be an honest asshole than a polite liar. And I think we're suffering from a wave of polite liars. Basically, it's people like, I mean, when the fucking celebrities that got up, I'm sorry. It's like, shut the fuck up, man. I know, man. It's like, shut the fuck up and
I'm in LA with these people. There's homeless people on the street every day, no shoes. I give money all the time, and I'm nowhere near as rich as half these people. Why are there even homeless people in LA? I'm talking about West LA. Beverly Hills, why do they exist? But they can make a video saying, we're so sorry that these things happen. Shut the fuck up. You're all right.
Dude, so I really appreciate that, because like for me, I've always respected somebody who can just, with some facts and some logic, tell me why they disagree with me. Or if they can't disagree with me on some facts and logic and they're a fucking moron, I'd rather know that, because then I can not have to associate with them. And it's the classic, I think I heard Eric July or someone talk about this, but he was saying like, if you're a owner of a store, let's say, you're selling, I don't know, whatever the fuck you're selling, electrical appliances. And let's say you're a white dude, let's just use the normal categorization. You're a white dude and you're a racist motherfucker, right? And you don't want to sell to Black people. Now, the government turns around and makes you sell to Black people, because that's apparently what the fuck is right to do. Now, you're going to have a fucking Black person go in there and buy something from this motherfucker who doesn't like you. Why should you give him your hard-earned money? Because the government's, it's such a fucking load of shit. Like, I would much rather, again, like in Australia, we don't have, there's not a huge Black community, but like there's a massive Southern European community. So we were sort of like, quasi, blacks in Australia. Like, my parents and everything came on a boat in the, in the 60s, and, they were categorized as the wogs and all this sort of shit. So when I grew up in high school, I was part of the wogs. Like we were the ethnic, fresh off the boat and all that sort of shit. But we didn't give a fuck. Like, we actually ended up finding pride in that stuff. And we would I would much rather prefer someone tell me to my face that they don't fucking like me. And I don't care. I'm not going to be friends with you. I don't have to fucking interact with you. And, you shouldn't have to be forced to like me just because it's politically correct. Fuck, I don't give a shit. And the thing is, and this is where the free market ideology stuff comes from, and the roots in private property is when, for example, racism on an individual basis exists, and it's unable to be institutionalized such that one small group has the power to inflict, some form of oppression on a group, whether in or out group. When that doesn't exist, on an individual basis, racism is only a problem to the person that's fucking racist, as an example. Because then guess what? Like, I'll use a job as an example. Let's say, me, for example, I go to apply for a fucking job as a salesperson, and I go into a, there's an area in Australia called Cronulla where there was a big race fight between the Arabs and the Wogs and the Aussies, the Surfies and all that sort of stuff. About, I think it was almost 10 or 12 years ago now. It was massive. So if you go there, like someone like me, there's no chance, I would get a job there. But here's the thing. Those guys would miss out, like whoever's running that sales company would miss out on one of the best salesperson in the country. And what will I do? I'll go find somewhere else to add that value. So what ends up happening is someone's bigotry or their inability to be tolerant or whatever, however we're going to phrase it, it's actually a detriment to them on an individual level. Whereas when we do it, when we impose these laws and these, you're going to have to be fucking like this because the government said so and because it's politically correct, we actually damage way more people than the individual who chooses to be a dickhead himself or a bigot in whatever way. So it's anyway, I just wanted to drill into that because that honesty, I think, is what's lacking. And the more we optimize society for safety and cushioning, the more we're going to build soft people. Like, I'm a fan of bravery and courage, not of victimhood. And we're just creating a fucking society full of victims.
And I think we just rotate through whatever category is, highlighted as the greatest victim in the given moment. And then the thought police come on and narrow the thought and narrow the acceptable speech around these issues. And that rotates around, as we've already mentioned, all the different people that can be construed as victims, which, let's be real, everyone is a victimizer and a victim simultaneously on some scale. All of us, every single human being, right? Yep. And so everyone can play that game at some point. And I think what we end up doing is we just end up suppressing real thought, real speech. And as you say, Zay, like, I don't want to interact with people who I know have, or who I don't know what their real opinion or position is on things. If you don't like me, if you think I'm an asshole, if you think I'm a whatever, I'd rather know, just, instead of have you feign some sort of, false appearance so that you're not called out or we can get by or whatever. And I think if we do go that way, so much of this gets suppressed, and that that frustration and those real sentiments and emotions flare up in some other way. And so, Zay, like, I'm curious, obviously you're far more involved in the Black community than, Aleks or I, and I'm sure you've had a lot of these, conversations. Two questions for you. One, when you encounter people that are thinking of it, let's just say in the kind of mainstream narrative way, like, yes, well, first of all, what in your mind is the end goal of the mainstream Black Lives Matter movement? What are these people in the street hoping to accomplish? And then two, what is the kind of nature of your conversations when you have one-on-one time with people that are kind of in that way of thinking about things? And what's the response when you maybe try to, frame things in the manner that we've been doing thus far in this conversation?
So the end game, I don't know. I don't know what Black Lives Matter's end game is. By visiting their website, looking at their goals, it seems to be a movement for the LGBTQ community, along with a movement for Black women. I don't really see the economic solutions. I don't see some of the problems that we can fix in our own community on there. I don't really see anything that would affect the change in police. I mean, I don't know what their end game is. I know that they're in the street. That's about it. For the people I have conversations with when they talk about Black Lives Matter movements or certain protests, I tell them exactly like I've told you all, and they usually agree with me. It's just they won't say it out loud. That's the problem. They'll literally agree with everything I said and then still go out to their family just to appease how it feels. And I've been the black sheep of my family for years, just with doing so. I mean, Bitcoin is just an example, like, you know what I mean? Like of being able to go on your own and find your own path based on what works and what is factual. And I really don't know what the end game is. And going forward, what I would like to see is a standard economic solution, because I've seen what works, and what works in America is group economics in communities. And that, like, you have Koreatown, you have Chinatown, you have Little Ethiopia, and you have, Little Armenia, all these places where people gather together, put their money together, and were able to spend it together. That is actually how you grow as a group. Because I want to remind people from an economic standpoint, if we kept it where the people who were racist didn't like Black people, if they stayed with their businesses, the median value of Black people rose steadily all the way up until the 60s when we had forced integration. When the government forces you to like somebody or forces you to have them in the store, it's like, okay, well, they're here, but they secretly hate me. And then we have what we have today. All of the best athletes, the best entertainers in our Black community, they go to white schools and get signed by white record labels who don't really like them. And they keep doing it over and over and over because everybody tries to be nice, tries to say the right thing. And then when it comes out, they never really liked you. They just wanted the money out of you. They're like, oh, I'm surprised. And I'm like, well, I mean, I've seen what works. And I can tell you right now, we're very tribal. And, at the end of the day, we're all going to be in this mix together. But if you want to know what works, I've seen what works. And it's not this be nice to everybody and everybody's our friend shit, unfortunately. And then the people who are allies, people who are friends, they'll naturally just come around. They'll just do what they normally do. Like, after the George Floyd incident, I have friends tell me that they had white people calling them saying, I'm so sorry because everything is going so wrong. And I was like, I have white friends and none of them called me. You know why? Because they're real friends. They're not fucking sympathetic, like, oh God, I can't believe this. You know what I mean? They're my real friends. They don't have to apologize for something somebody else did. So I just think this, like Alex was saying, being forced to like people, being forced to have this certain opinion, it only hurts everybody on an individual level, because I'm not going away. I'm damn sure not apologizing for anything that I say ever. But the people who go on TV, who get these opportunities, usually are just apologetic, and to me are very, very soft. Because if you stand on what you're saying, you should be willing to die for it. If not, why are you even saying it?
Nice. Say, let me ask you this, because, just by virtue of your appearance, you've written a book called Bitcoin and Black America. I assume, at least in part, because of all the, what's going on in the media today, you're probably being requested, you're probably being requested by some of these people that we're referring to come on and represent that side of things. What, like, do you ever kind of surprise them when you articulate these thoughts? Are they expecting something different out of you, and can you sense that? Or like, just what's the general interaction and response from people that maybe are thinking you'll deliver one message and you deliver another?
Well, usually, like I said, when it's economic based and it's factual, they end up agreeing with me. And I haven't really had an argument, so to say, with somebody, or a disagreement. I think most people know what's going on is bullshit, but they can't say it. So then when I say it, they actually are appreciative, and they're like, thank you for finally saying it as a Black person. Because anybody white could say the Black Lives Matter movement is trash, they would get killed online. And when I say it, I'm like, and this is why, they're like, well, yeah, it is kind of trash. Like, I don't know, nobody in my family is like a Black Lives Matter person. They're just like, yeah, they listen to what I'm telling them economically. And I'm like, that's what we should be focusing on. And all the smoke and mirrors and all of the stuff that, like you said, virtue signaling wise, it doesn't apply to Black people. Like, if you look at it, the NAACP, owned by white people. BET, owned by white people. These are not black organizations. Like, what are you talking about? Real black organizations are usually local and are usually funded by the people that live in that area. And those real organizations, when I speak to them, they understand what I'm saying. Now, the mainstream people, I don't know these people. I don't even really associate with them. They haven't invited me on the show. Maybe they have seen some of the stuff I've tweeted or said before, but I don't really have much disagreements because it's factual. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, and I think this will be a good segue into maybe some Bitcoin stuff. But I think one of the things that we can all appreciate is that everyone has been, or nearly everyone has been adversely affected by the current economic system in which we're forced to exist. And that creates a lot of frustration, a lot of angst, a sense of unfairness. It breeds a lot of inequality, of course. And I think it's enticing when your particular group gets singled out for the sympathy card on this round of the media fair, that it's enticing to say, oh, like, this is how I get my share. This is how I get my recognition. This is how I vent that anger. This is how I get mine. Like, it's finally like all this frustration that's underneath. This is how I now get it. And I can see how enticing that is, regardless of whatever group it is. And I think the three of us would agree that we totally get that frustration and angst and, unfairness that's built into the current system we operate in. But we've got to be so disciplined, I think, as individuals, not to latch on to the first solution or appearance of a solution, and perhaps false solution that we see emerge, the first one that gets a bit of support from the people that we think, typically weren't on our team or that are now deciding to be our allies. We've got to be real careful not to basically just take the first prize that comes along. We really got to focus, and this is why discussion is so important. We have to determine true causes of all this stuff. What is the cause of inequality? What is the cause of violence? What is the cause of this angst and frustration? And without that, we're just going to keep, in this recursive cycle of these things happening again until it gets worse and worse and worse. So, let's talk about how the economic system breeds this, and let's talk about, a solution. Alex?
I'll chime in there. I think one of the things you mentioned there is something I talk about a lot, which is thinking symptomatically versus thinking about the cause. And it aligns with a lot of the psychological kind of study I did when I was younger. So I did a lot of neurolinguistics, NLP, and all that sort of stuff when I was young. But there's a core tenet of a lot of that line of thought, which is: are you at cause or are you at effect? And it helps you become responsible for your own decisions. But it helps you start to think a little bit deeper. And then, as an extension to that, thinking holistically and thinking about things from first order principles, and then thinking about multiple order effects when you're doing stuff. And then this is all related to thinking deeper than just thinking about the surface level symptom or what might be a solution to what seems to be the problem in front of you, but misses the deeper problem. So this is why, it's one of the reasons why I really love Bitcoin, because it makes you, by definition, think layers deep. It's not, you then realize that things like, skin color, politics, left, right, fucking whatever other label, you start to realize that none of that shit actually means anything. And you start to dig at, the core of what some of these problems are. So I think that's sort of like a first thing is, we've spent 100 years now educating people to basically regurgitate information instead of educating them to think critically. Instead of educating them to think deeply. So that's where a lot of this problem spawns from. And again, if we look where that comes from the institutionalization of education and the state, or again, which is a derivative of a collective, or it's a representation of a collective, deciding what everybody should know, what they should be taught, and basically building factory drones. I.e. their version of or understanding of humans, through a fucking sausage machine, basically. We go in one way and, we basically get all of our, our own thinking, our own creativity, and our own personalities drummed out of us for fucking 12 years, and we get spat out the other side. as another fucking sausage that's been that's been told what to think, not how to think, and what's fucking real and what's not. So, I mean, I don't know how to how to get the world back to thinking more critically and all that sort of stuff, except through, I don't know. I was on the Kaiser report earlier, and one of the things I mentioned was, in the same way that the USA was founded on the basis of people getting the fuck away from the oppressive monarchy and like finding a new promised land and building something from scratch. And you had that prosperity, like, freedom breeds opportunity, and opportunity is, the base incentive for the betterment of individuals. And when you take away freedom, you start to take away opportunity. And what's interesting is that equality and freedom are dichotomies, that they don't work together. Like, the more you try and make everything equal, by definition, you remove equality. You set the parameters through which something can behave or exist. So, I think equality is the fucking dumbest possible goal, of humanity. I think freedom is the goal, and then that freedom, like I said, breeds opportunity, and then opportunity breeds the desire for people to get better. Now, it's not a clean process. There's always going to be dickheads around, but by and large, the incentive to exist, hinges on core behaviors like, honesty, truth, integrity, blah, blah, blah. And that's why those things have become, good features. So before I go off on, I tend to fucking go onto these tangents, but I think, Bitcoin being its own version of a promised land is why I think the idea behind the Bitcoin fixes this hashtag is so powerful, because it represents the new age version of, the creation of, the Constitution of America, which was the last time people really were able to go to a new land and build something from scratch. And we saw how powerful that was. America became the dominant power of the world for the last, quarter of a fucking millennium. That's a long time. But I think the next couple thousand years, we're going to see the emergence of the new promised land, but it's going to be built on a new social contract, on a new set of rules that are far more incorruptible than the Constitution, and that is, the Bitcoin consensus algorithm. So anyway, that's a long way of me kind of saying, yeah, we have hope.
Zay, you keep coming in and out. Are you?
Yeah. It was all good. But, yeah.
You're a little bit choppy.
Let's see.
You might be better now. Try again. Maybe kill your video and just keep the audio.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, I'm done. How's
No, it's still frozen.
still? All right. Let's see here.
You there?
Okay. Can you hear me?
You're still pretty choppy.
All right. Let me jump back on, and fix something real quick.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
While Zay's doing that, funny, I just got an email from Crunchbase, and at the bottom it says, racism, how should CEOs respond? Barbara Shannon, founder of the CEO Peer Group, the CEO board, and host of the B Suite podcast, whatever the fuck that is, shares why it's not only acceptable but expected that business leaders address racism, white supremacy, and criminal fucking justice reform head on. She offers a path for CEOs and business leaders who don't know where to begin, stating that doing nothing under the guise of professionalism is no longer an option. Go fuck yourself. Like, seriously, who the fuck are you to tell me what to do and how to think, you monkey? Like,
all right, hold on. Zay, you back?
Yeah, I'm back. How is it now? Is it
Yeah, it's
better?
good. But now there you go. All right, you're better.
Yeah, I think you're still in my Wi-Fi right now.
Yeah, you're drinking beers at 10 a.m.
10 a.m. baby, celebrate Friday.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught any of what Alex was saying, but where did you leave off?
Discussing about how Bitcoin can be effective because of the consensus algorithm, and I caught the end of that. But yeah, remind me again. What are we talking about?
I'd like to get your take on this because I think this is part of the things you've been talking about. But the irony of a lot of this is that I think if you dig down deep enough, a big cause of this inequality, this dislocation, misallocation of capital, disenfranchised groups of people, is largely to do with the inefficiencies and the downright unfairness of the allocation of capital and the operation of the state. And the irony is that the more these problems are exacerbated, the more the people affected by them look to that very entity for solutions. And in doing so, they actually basically ask that entity to be bigger, to have more influence, to control this more, to control that more, to allocate this, to allocate that. And by doing so, making the problem that affects them this time, but also everyone else in many different capacities, worse. And that's such a huge irony. And Alex was basically saying we shouldn't be striving for equality, for everything to be equal across the board. But what we should be striving for is fairness, right? You should have basically an even playing field. Not that everyone's going to start at the same place. Obviously, everyone is starting at different places. But once you enter the game, the rules should be the same for everybody. And then you succeed or you fail based on your merit. And yes, some people are going to start, ahead and they're going to squander that lead. Other people are going to start below and they're going to fucking catch up. Other people are going to start ahead and they'll stay ahead. As long as the rules of the game are fair, that's the most we can ask for. And I think that is the thing that most people don't recognize, that the game that we're all in the midst of right now is so incredibly unfair and it favors such a small group of people and gives that small group of people so much power that it affects negatively pretty much everyone who's outside of that circle, some more than others, some at different time than others, but me, Alex, Zay, and everybody else watching this in different ways. And so fairness, I think, is the ideal. And Zay, you wrote a book about why, Bitcoin represents that. So why don't you dig into that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. So Bitcoin is the only money system that is out today that actually has, actual censorship resistance. It allows you to be self-sovereign. There is no centralized leader or building, and you make Bitcoin or earn Bitcoin and earn the money based on the work you do. And most people, when they earn that money, is overtaxed in the U.S. system, or is taken away from them systematically with a bunch of other fees and tax that don't need to be attached to anything. And I think if we're going to move forward with fairness, Bitcoin is as fair as it gets. If you earn the money, you earned it. And of course, there were people at the beginning that had more, have a little, but the overall rules to the game are the same. We know the rules, they're in the white paper. They're constantly updated to appease people who come into it, but they're not, the foundation isn't changed. So I think that's why it's a better money system. And I think because the rules are rigged, and a lot of the wealth in the country was taken out of Black communities systematically, Bitcoin is our only chance going forward to have that fairness. Because like you said, in my opinion, fairness is the goal, not necessarily equality. So most people in the Black community just want to be left alone. And if you want to be left alone to your own vices and make money, which I think most of us do, Bitcoin is pretty much the only way. Because of fiat currency, you have somebody who prints it, literally just types numbers in, like 10 guys, and then they give it to their friends, and then they just circle it amongst each other, and then we get a small trickle down, us regular people. So if you want a really fair system, you have to go to the root. All of this other stuff is just smoke and mirrors. It's distracting. Who gives a shit? Go straight to the source. The source of most of these problems is the Fed. That's everybody. All these marches, people marching on the Fed. Like,
yes.
You just see a massive wave of all these millions of people. That's how I know it's kind of fake, because if they actually sat down and read, like, all right, what's the real problem? You wouldn't have all these marches directed down the street to, some courthouse or whatever, and people stand outside just being mad. Like, what is that?
Right. It's the money. People should be holding. It's the money matters. The money matters.
Exactly. Who cares about Black Lives Matter street or You put this yellow Black Lives Matter thing on the pavement and people are spraying. Who cares? Nobody that I know that has joined this movement has actually increased the economic well-being of the people around them. I have, because I don't play into a lot of the bullshit. Does racism exist? Absolutely. But I can't look my kids in the face and say I couldn't succeed because of white men. Like, that's just not me or most of the people I know. So yes, it does exist, but if we want to talk about the problem, it's the Fed. The reason a lot of this racism or racist practice has happened by banks is because they're beholden to the investors to hold a certain standard that was created, I don't know, hundreds of years ago or 100 years ago. So banks are just doing what they've always done. And if the money system changes, they won't have that freedom to do it anymore because nobody will use them or nobody will use their services. So I think we have to get to the root. I think Bitcoin is one solution, a very big one. And I think people in my community as well as others should adopt it.
And what kind of feedback or reception do you get when you frame the problem in that way? Like, are people starting to have the light bulb moment where they see that the problem is more about the money and not, whatever else? Are people starting to see that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In massive ways, people have been holding up Bitcoin in Black America signs at protests. Some people have brought up Bitcoin in LA. Somebody brought up Bitcoin at a protest. First thing he said was, "We need an economic solution. We should buy Bitcoin."
Was and that I am the character?
I am the character. Yeah. So
that was awesome.
They're starting to understand it, and then on top of just the movement itself, a lot of people are tired of protesting. They're like, "Why are we doing this shit again?" And it's like, how can this be the last time? And I think that's when you start to turn to the economics. In fact, there is a lot of talk around a day in the near future where all Black people are going to buy Bitcoin at the same time, at least $5 worth, to show that we can exit the system if we need to and the leverage we need. Now, the exact date, I don't know, because we're still getting it figured out. But that movement, I didn't start it. Somebody hit me up and was like, "Hey, did you hear that?" That's what I'm saying. I can see the passion being turned into economic, because a lot of times, people get real emotional, and then you look at them and you're like, "All right, now what?" And then they don't have an answer for you. So you got to change that. And I think the sentiment is changing.
Dude, I love that everyone's gonna get together and buy $5. That's fucking sick.
That's a real protest, right?
Yeah, man.
Black, white, Asian, get everyone in the world Bitcoin buying day.
You can do it from home on your phone.
Yeah,
you don't have to go out in the street and risk getting shot in the face with a rubber bullet or getting chased by dogs or police. Because I really don't think protests are beneficial to Black people, because you probably are more likely to get in trouble while you're out there or something happened to you. But if you want to protest, you can do it from the house, do it from your phone. And we can do it weekly. You can $5 a week. Everybody who wants to join, thousands, millions, however many, just start buying Bitcoin. And you'll see a response real quick. I guarantee you. And one of the things that it may be a coincidence, but if you really want a response and you want people to feel you, low hanging fruit for Black people is to be like, "Oh, fuck Trump. I hate Trump. He's not listening to anything he's saying." But what I will say is the one time he tweeted about Bitcoin was the day I dropped my book. The one time before or after. So I can guarantee you that is what you call actual impact, versus fuck Trump. That's low hanging fruit. Who cares? Like, you can just say that and just walk away. Can you write a book that can actually change or have an idea or be a part of an idea that can actually change what you don't like? That's what we need to strive for.
Yeah, man.
100%. Yeah, it's. I'm encouraged by people like yourself, say, that are, putting this stuff out. And even though, like we said at the beginning, or actually, let's dig into this, because I wanted to ask you when you said it, but, you talked about focusing on communities, right? Chinatown, Black community, Koreatown, whatever. And then you said, like, and anybody who doesn't ascribe or associate to anything in particular, I mean, they're more than welcome to come in and out. What do you think is the benefit of even kind of emphasizing like kind of group interaction in that way, even if it's just economic? You're not saying like anything else other than, we want to try to support our group via interacting economically with each other. Why do you think that is important, or, a better solution than just saying we should all just interact economically based on economics and not anything else?
Because again, like I said, statistically, when most of the wealth plateaued in the Black community, it was during integration and forced integration. So when I've seen communities that have come to America and have flourished, they've done it with group economics. I have an ex-girlfriend that was Mexican, and her family literally created 3 or 4 millionaires because the first generation that got here hired the kids, and then the neighbors that were around them, they worked for those businesses. And then their kids went to college and they were able to be doctors, lawyers, because they kept that money within their community. Now, did they not allow anybody to come buy food from them or come to their businesses? No, it's open to everybody. But if you have a strong group economics, then you can pull yourself up, so to say, by your bootstraps without somebody having to help. Because I mean, out here in Koreatown, their businesses aren't even in English. Some of them, they don't even give a shit. They're like, we don't care if you can read, because we support each other, which makes them viable in the economic landscape of the world. So being in a group and being able to take care of yourself as a group is not bad, because when it comes to businesses and being able to buy things, people are going to shop with the best businesses. But how do you get there? Money. And if you can't get any investment from banks, and VCs are only giving money to, or 99% of money is not going to Black owners, you got to support each other. And that's where the money comes from. So that's why I think it works. And I think Bitcoin can help with that. But of course, you can't solve everything with one solution, one overnight.
Actually, there's something I want to touch on there, bro, is the what do you call it? These communities like Koreatown, Chinatown, you know, all this sort of stuff. It's, you know, this word diversity, it pisses me off sometimes because everyone throws it around. Oh, you know, it's all about diversity. But, and then they say, oh, we can't have discrimination. What I don't understand, I just did 2 videos that I'm going to post live on a little channel that I'm creating. It'll go live later this week or early next week. It's called Discrimination and Diversity. So I've got it in 2 parts, and say that they go fucking hand in hand. Like what you're talking about, like creating these communities that support themselves. And yeah, they might be more consistent of Koreans, or more consistent of Chinese, or more consistent of Arabs, or whatever the you know, the line in which they want to consist of. But what that actually does is it maintains cultural diversity better than trying to integrate everyone forcefully and make everyone have the same cultural fucking values or the same cultural beliefs or the same, like that creates homogenous, monotonous societies that are weak. There's no then ability to differentiate, and this ability to group together, to, you know, I think you mentioned it before, like that we're tribal by nature, and it's true that's what human beings are. We're chimps, you know, just with less hair. That's, you know, really the only difference is you know, and we're a little bit smarter apparently. But it's when we create these large homogenous institutions, like, you know, governments and central banks, etc., where we try and apply blanket rules to everybody, that things really start to go awry. And this is, again, the power of bringing things back to being local. You know, the more localized it is, the more people can voluntarily come together around things that they value, you know, be it cultural, be it, you know, religious, belief-based, or whatever the case might be. And it's just, yeah, I think that's just an important point for people to realize is, you know, forced, you know, diversity, you know, leads to homogenization and actually defeats diversity, you know, and you never have it. Whereas allowing for freedom, for discrimination, and the ability for people to, you know, create the groups that they want to create, you actually breed true natural diversity. And these leftists and social justice warriors, more so, they don't get it. You know, they're literally, because they don't think deeper. You know, earlier I was talking about thinking about, you know, second, third, fourth, and subsequent order effects. These social justice warriors seem to only think of a first order effect, and they don't realize that most of the actions they're taking actually defeat what they're out there waving the fucking banner for. Like they're doing the opposite. And that's just because they don't take the time to think deeper. And I think that's, again, a problem of running people through an educational system that is a sausage machine. You know, you feed them through one end and they come out the other end all the fucking same. You know, we're a bunch of drones who can't think for ourselves. So I think it's really important. And this also ties back into John's point earlier about, you know, letting ideas and speech flow freely, because the more of that happens, and the more honest that can be, the more people can coalesce and converge around the values that matter to them, and think critically. This is why I'm such a proponent of freedom. It's such a better optimization than equality and safety, because equality and safety, I mean, if you want equality and safety, go to fucking North Korea. Like, there you go. That's equality and safety for you. Everyone's fucking equal, everyone's safe, but no one's happy. Like, I would much rather the messiness of freedom, and the diversity that creates, because that's so much more like nature. And the more we diverge from nature, the more deranged we become. So anyway, I want to drill on that point because I really like that.
Yeah, I agree with that, Alex. And I can't remember who said the quote, but it's something along the lines of, if you give up freedom to get security, you'll get neither, or something like that. And, one of the things that I find so strange about the times we're in is whatever issue pops up, I'll look at it through the lens of freedom normally. Now, I know there's nuances in any discussion, and that's why we have these discussions. But for me, that is typically the ideal. I mean, it's strange to me that people would want something other than that. Like, freedom means you as an individual can go forth and try to, live the life that you want. Obviously, there's certain principles inherent in that. And even if, people say, yeah, but like, you're not free to assault me. And, I would say, well, I actually am. Like, I could, if I wanted to, like, I could run up on you and assault you. So you should be like, that should be a consideration for you as a free person. How do you defend yourself, protect yourself, extricate yourself from a threatening situation? But that is also a consideration about the society we want to exist in and the communities we want to exist in. Will I be ostracized, extricated, defunded, whatever, if I exhibit that harmful, aggressive, violent behavior unprovoked, for example, right? But the freedom is still there, and I think we should prioritize freedom, and then think about the responsibilities and measures that we need to take in order to responsibly use the freedom that we have in any domain. And I feel like today that's somehow a controversial thing. Is people are actually against freedom. They're saying, no, I want you to think this way. I want you to act this way. I want someone to control your behavior. And I'm sitting around during these conversations thinking, how did we get here where that is such a controversial thing? That freedom is what, the great heroes of our past have so often fought for, and we've idolized them. And now we're in a period now where the ideal, in many cases, at least the one that's, gets mainstream, attention and spotlight, is conforming to the ideals and the ideologies and the sensibilities of somebody other than yourself. And that seems like a very strange thing to me.
I've got a friend of mine who she's really smart, but she's become a fucking SJW, and it drives me mental. And we sort of had this conversation, right, when she mentioned, but there's downsides to freedom. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, there's downsides to everything, right? But the downside to freedom is not, detrimental to the individuals that make up society on a mass scale, right? The downsides of freedom can be detrimental to a few people, but fundamentally, like, the way I define freedom, and I'll steal from Taleb here, despite him thinking that I'm an idiot, apparently. But Taleb talks about the silver rule instead of the golden rule, and the differentiation there is the golden rule is do unto others as you wish them to do unto you. And he talks about the problem with that line of thought is that you may want something different than somebody else, so you probably shouldn't do that because your values could be different. So the silver rule is do not do unto others as you do not wish them to do unto you, and that's a much narrower line of things, but it means that you don't go out and because we can all generally agree on things that we don't want. We don't want to be bashed, we don't want to be stolen from, we don't want to be locked up, all this sorts of shit, right? There's very few people, even people who might be aggressive in nature, they don't want to get beaten up or all of this sort of stuff. So it's a good core rule, and I think true freedom lies in the freedom to choose. And the part that's really important with the freedom to choose is that in that it's inconsistent to take away somebody else's freedom to choose. So if we temper the notion of freedom with the fact that your freedom is just as important as somebody else's freedom, and as a result, we have a core ethic in society that morally frowns upon intruding on somebody else's freedom. If you start from that basis, you can then build a society that's got robust freedom, robust property rights, strong individuals, with ethics and morals, etc. But that's a grassroots movement, which requires education and all that sort of stuff. But it also requires, first and foremost, a system, economic system particularly. And the reason I really focus on economic system, because there is no other system of human collaboration that allows us to exist or to coexist. So it has to be economic by definition. That is time and energy, resources allocated amongst constituents in a society. So we need an economic foundation upon which to build, and it needs to be from scratch. And that's why I'm such a proponent of Bitcoin, because it is a blank slate. It's a clean slate. Like Zay said earlier, it's got fixed fucking rules. It allows the world to be dynamic, the same as nature. Some people, I always hear people say, oh, what about the Winklevosses, who have so much Bitcoin? Well, fuck, man. Shit happens. They've got a lot. They're going to have a lot. At some point, that's going to filter back into the system. It may not all filter back because they might want to die rich fucking misers and pass it on to their kids, but their kids might turn up to be, degenerate fucking junkies who then spend it all, and it all goes back into the system. But at least they can't get an unfair advantage, because like we sort of said earlier, is equality is such a poor goal. Like, inequality is normal across everything in nature, across everything in the universe, that there's nothing equal. Everything is fucking different. The problem is unfairness, and when you can rig the game for your own benefit at the expense of everybody else, that's when people get pissed off. My rants. I never remember what I
think that's a good analogy though, Alex, because, if we look for equality on the individual basis between two people, and I think the nature is a good example. Like, if the lion is equal as the gazelle, then, maybe that relationship is some sort of utopian, but the system is not harmonious. The system doesn't balance, right? Sure. But if you allow for inequality in pockets that's mediated by the functioning of the system at large, then you'll get a more adaptive, a more harmonious, a more broadly functioning system, rather than trying to equalize every single point within it.
Well, you can't. And that's that dichotomy between equality and freedom. And if you allow a system to be free based on rules that are the same for everyone, you create something that's dynamic. Another video that I recorded the other day was, equality breeding conformity. And, equality is such a fucking bad goal, man. It's such a bad goal because it's the antithesis to nature. It's the antithesis to freedom. It's the antithesis to opportunity. In our bid for equality, we're actually going to destroy opportunity. So there's all these people who even talk about equality of opportunity. That's actually a misnomer. You can't have equality of opportunity unless we nuke the entire fucking world and we start from scratch. By definition, people are going to be starting at different points. So because I used to, I've never been a fan of equality of outcome. That's just completely deranged. But the more and more I think deeply about the difference between equality and fairness, you start to realize that equality of opportunity is also a scam as well, because by definition, you can't have it. We can't all of a sudden start from the same point. So, but you can have fairness in the game. Right. And the only way we can do that, again, is by starting fresh, by going somewhere else. And because we don't have a new land to go to, we all can't fit on a fucking island somewhere. We need to start on a new set of rules, a new constitution, call it. And that constitution, it lives in the digital realm. And its rules are written, like Zay said earlier, in the white paper. And that's so fucking profound. And this is where, my head blows up when I think about this stuff. I think, holy crap, we're laying the foundation for the next couple millennia Not, this isn't a get rich quick over the next 20 years game. This is big. This is really, really,
That's
big.
exactly what Bitcoin is. It's the game with rules that can't be corrupted, right?
Yeah.
Every other time we've tried to play this, and I agree, Alex, equality of opportunity is impossible. So and I think what people say that, I think what they're intending to mean is everyone playing by the same rules, but maybe it's not the right words to use. But that's what Bitcoin represents. It is the game with uncorruptible rules, because anytime even, the Constitution of the US, which is, the foresight and the way that the founding fathers articulated that shit, it was amazing for its time and in the history of the world. I mean, it really was a thoughtful way to try to construct a society, a nation, whatever, the way that people interact with each other. But it fundamentally was just a rule, and it had no real inherent enforcing mechanism. It could be corrupted. It couldn't maintain its own essence effectively. And we've seen how that's devolved over time. And because I think a lot of the reason why people fail to grasp this stuff is they've been in this system so long that when you talk about concepts of freedom and stuff, it's terrifying to them. And one simple example related to Bitcoin is it's a paradigm shift to take your own financial sovereignty, to know that the bank's not there to keep guard of your funds or to pay back your Visa if it gets stolen. You are now completely responsible for that. And we've delegated or abdicated our responsibility in so many different domains up to this point that people are kind of terrified of bringing all the responsibility, power, and freedom back to themselves. And what's so exciting and terrifying is that this new game, where everyone plays by the same rules, it requires that of you. That's what it means to play in that game, is to do those things. And if you're willing to play by those rules, those rules won't change. And that is such an underappreciated aspect of this, that we can now get involved in a game where we're all going to be playing by the same rules. And that's what we want, I think.
It's that, but it even goes, I'm going to add a layer on top of that, is that it's because it's so voluntary in nature. It allows those of us who want to take full responsibility to take full responsibility. And then it allows for the existence of products, services, and things like that to exist that allow those who are, not willing to take as much responsibility to take less responsibility at some perceived cost. Sure. But the cost and the risk can no longer be hidden. And that's where I think we go wrong with the current system, is that people get the notion of safety. They get the feeling of everything's okay, whilst risks are basically hidden. And you get real cancerous systemic problems, which then end up blowing up in our face, whether you want to call it 2008, whether you want to call it COVID, whether you want to fucking .com, boom, whatever. They come out in these catastrophic eruptions versus because they're unknowns. And I think, you'll never get a society of, everyone being 100% responsible. But when there's an accurate price for irresponsibility, or when there's an accurate price for delegating responsibility, you have a more robust system that isn't prone to blowing up. And I think that's a big differentiation. And it's part of Bitcoin's voluntary nature, which I think, again, is fundamentally important. Like in today's society, we can't fucking choose. We're forced. There is no voluntary option. You're forced to grow up in the country you're born in. You're forced to adopt that fucking currency. You're forced to be that citizen. You can't fucking travel anywhere, depending on where you're born, obviously. You're forced to pay taxes. You're forced to participate in inflation. You're forced to use, certain banking institutions. Like, it's all forceful. It's not voluntary. And that, again, starts to constrict, people's ability to be free, and therefore it constricts opportunity, and therefore, creates morons, which then perpetuates into where we are now, where people are fighting about shit they don't even understand.
And I find it interesting when you bring up Bitcoin and being able to be self-sovereign. Some people don't want that. which is that was the most surprising thing to me. Was I was so excited. I was like, yes, finally a way I can earn money outside of the system. I can use it for what I need. I can, you know, whatever. It's just as fair as it gets. I can look on the blockchain and see every transaction when I feel like it. This is great. Then I tell people and they're like, well, I don't want to hold my own private keys. Can somebody else do it? And I'm like, that's people have been so forcefully or so used to being forced to do stuff and have been given all these services. They don't even want real freedom, or they don't even really want to be sovereign. They really want to rely on other people, because that's what we've been doing. You get food delivered to you, get your groceries delivered. Somebody else, you know, has your water. Somebody else builds your house. Somebody else fixes your car. Somebody else does everything for everybody. It's so many things that if you did it yourself and you were actually sovereign, you would see how much better of a system it would be. But we're so used to it. People, they can't even fathom being financially free from a bank, which is hilarious, because there was a time where banks didn't run the country. You know, before the Federal Reserve. Let's see, what if somebody's over the age of 107, they might remember it. I doubt it, but nobody remembers a time before that, because everybody's dead from before the Federal Reserve. Nobody can describe. But if you look through history, when there was, you know, greenbacks and different currencies going around, that was actually, outside of today, that was actually the biggest time for business growth in the Black community. So when I tell people that, I was like, in the late 1800s, after the Civil War, we wasn't just some slaves that were downtrodden and couldn't do anything. That's when they built Rosewood. That's when they built Black Wall Street in Tulsa. It's when they built in Wilmington. Because when you're left to your own devices and you can just build freely, you always end up better. And then when you have to force it on the people, we get what we have now, where people are still asking the government to give us money. And I'm like, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what we have today, unfortunately.
It's a good point, man. You know, and this digs down to something, you know, even beyond Bitcoin and stuff. And it's that if you allow yourself, if you don't deal with fear on the most fundamental levels as a, you know, human being, you're going to shun freedom and responsibility. And I think, you know, that's at least a part what's at play here, is that people are actually, as you say, a lot of people, of course, they'll pay lip service to it, but we see by people's actions to what degree of freedom they want. And you'd have to conclude most people do not want it. And perhaps that's a large reason why we're in the state we're in many cases and places around the world today, because it's easy to say that, you know, being free is wonderful and that's what people really want. But most people, if you look at their actions, no interest. They want some combination of comfort and security and pleasure and gratification, and even in some cases, you know, struggle and pain. But freedom is a little bit too terrifying. Freedom is a little bit too terrifying for people. And I think, you know, that's definitely operating on many different levels today.
Hey, Harriet Tubman even said it. There was some people that didn't want to leave the plantation, even if they just wouldn't leave. So some people want freedom, some people don't. They're willing to work for it. And like you said, there is some fear that is associated with it, because you don't know. But that's where the fear comes from, not knowing. And then once you can figure it out, get it going, yeah, it's a lot easier, a lot better world, in my opinion.
And this speaks to the kind of hard, soft thing that we've all addressed in this conversation, is that, you know, freedom requires courage to overcome fear, to go into the unknown, to learn new things, to take more responsibility requires courage. And there's probably a lot of people that lack lack the courage, the grit, the toughness that's required to do that. And, you know, we're all familiar with that meme of good times create weak men create bad times create strong men. Of course, people, women, whatever. But, you know, I think that's, there's some truth to that, because it's, yes, the system is rigged against people and it probably exacerbates those qualities in people, but it's not, we can't direct everything outwardly in terms of laying blame. You know, there is so much blame to be directed inwardly towards each of us as individuals. And we've got to sort that shit out, if not before, but at least simultaneous as we work towards external solutions, because otherwise ain't nothing going to change.
Well, this is actually why economics is so important, because, see, again, in a system that rewards freedom and risk and opportunity, something, again, like Bitcoin, or, you know, free market capitalism, whatever you want to label it as, what ends up happening is, so I would argue that people inherently do want freedom. and I think they all do, but I think it's just been drummed and conditioned out of us.
It depends what you mean by wants. How do we assess what somebody wants? Is it their behavior? Is it what they say?
I think it's more an innate desire, but it's something that is buried in layers of conditioning that, whether that conditioning is optimized for safety, for comfort, for ease, for speed, for quickness, whatever the rationale around optimizing for something other than freedom is. The big one is probably safety. That's the easy one to invoke on people, because you make them fear for their life in some way, shape, or form. Then they're willing to give up freedom. But fundamentally, freedom is a core human need, I believe. I think it's a core human driver. Now, what you end up having, and this is again probably one of the things that's powerful about Bitcoin, is you have a system that some of us are going to have a huge advantage over the next decade because we're in Bitcoin relatively early. We're going to have a huge economic advantage, and that economic advantage, alongside the fact that we think a lot deeper about not only money, life, economics, etc., will give us then another advantage in terms of productivity, in terms of the way we live together, the way we interact, and all that sort of stuff. And that is fundamentally that's a pull to other people. I believe there's sentiments that act like waves through society, and for the last 50 years, the sentiment has sort of been about safety and about protectionism, versus this Bitcoin starting a grassroots movement towards the sentiment for freedom and for the individual again. And I think that's going to start to take over and gain traction as people see people like Zay, yourself, John, myself, and all these Bitcoiners start to really live a better fucking life. And there's going to be a draw card for that. So anyway, that's sort of my sense around freedom. But Zay, I think you've got to jump off soon, bro. So I'll give you the closing words, man.
Oh yeah. I just want to encourage anybody watching, and thank you for having me again, John. Good to be with you, Alex. But I just want to encourage anybody watching, find truth for yourself. Don't listen to the media. Do the opposite. If you do the opposite of what the media tells you, you're probably right about 90% of the time.
Yep.
Don't get emotional and focus on the economics, because if you solve the money, you pretty much solve every problem from that point forward. So let's solve the money. Let's get it, the Bitcoin aspect of it going, as well as others, but mostly with Bitcoin. And from there, I would just encourage people to think for themselves and strive for real freedom, like we've discussed today.
Well said, man. Zay, I really appreciate the time and all the work that you're doing. I think it's awesome. And I know we'll speak again in the future, man. Take care.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man.
Take care, brother.
Oh, yeah. I'll see you, Alex.
Ciao.
Alex, you got a few more minutes?
Yeah, bro. I got a few more minutes.
I want to ask you one thing. So I've been reading, I was late to reading The Sovereign Individual. I'm almost done now. Have you read the book?
Yeah, I read it about 6 months ago. Yeah.
I mean, interesting book to say the least, but one of the, it does articulate what they call a mega political trend that is occurring in the information age, and all the different implications of how that technology gets integrated and used by culture and individuals. And, one of the things that it predicts is that, this will create a lot of disruption for the nation state model. And in the kind of, as it unwinds, I guess, as it becomes more disrupted by this technology and the implications for individuals that it represents, that we will see kind of, its devolution in many forms. And it kind of predicts that we'll see a lot of this social bifurcation to different groups. And as people feel they're disenfranchised, they'll associate with their groups, and they'll make their case for, more rewards from society or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So all that to say, do you think what we're seeing now, BLM, SJW, gender stuff, pick your poison, is actually a good thing because it may be indicative of that change that's occurring?
Look, I mean, it's fundamentally not a good thing, but it's just fundamentally part of the process, I guess. So I think, have you ever read Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand stuff?
No, I know. I've been recommended many times.
Brother, please, man. Like that. Like if I had to burn every book that I've ever read, and keep one, it'd be that. Like seriously. And I recommend the audiobook. Like the narrator that they've got is brilliant. Like I've gone through probably 250 audiobooks in the last 2-3 years, and by far, the narrator on this one is like the man. Like he holds character across every single character for the entire 64 hours. Like you won't be able to put it down.
Holy shit.
Yeah. But anyway, she kind of puts into like a fictional narrative what happens to society as the collectivists take over effectively. And everything that's basically written in The Sovereign Individual, she wrote it back in the 50s, but just in a fictional form, and sort of shows how, different, factions and different groups fucking try and, struggle for power, not based on merit, but based on, their definition of need, and whether that need be, be racial, political, religious, or whatever the case might be. And what she shows in it is, the men of the mind, as she calls it, so that the real producers, they escape to a valley. And, there's a guy called John Galt who helps, basically who entices each of the greater producers to just drop everything and get the fuck out of there and leave to the valley to help perpetuate, the fall of society on top of itself. So I guess in a sense, what Satoshi did, he chucked John Galt basically. He's created a Galt's Gulch, a valley, which is in effect Bitcoin. It's this new land that is, giving an incentive to people like you and I, like people with a brain, to say, I'm getting the fuck out of here and, going somewhere else. And allowing us to basically shelter ourselves. It's the Noah's Ark story. It's, we've built an ark, we're able to sail away as the rest of the ignorant monkeys basically burn themselves to the ground naturally. So so my answer to your question is, it's not nice, it's not good, but it's just a necessary part of the transformation. Like you can't have, I think I wrote it in The Rise of the Individual, Fall of the State article that I did last year, was there is no such thing as change that's neat. Like by definition, change is disruptive, for fuck's sake. Like, there is no central planner that can make it, like Ray Dalio's proverbial smooth landing. Shut the fuck up, man. What smooth landing are you talking about, you idiot? Like he talks about a paradigm shift in one paragraph, and then the next paragraph is talking about a smooth landing. It doesn't fucking work like that. This is not a computer model. This is real life. This isn't a simulation as far as we know. So it's as this thing topples under its own weight, because the parasites now fundamentally become almost as large as the host, right? Like the host is about to die because the parasite's too big. And the parasite, by definition, can't stop sucking because now it's addicted to the food, to the source. It's going to fall over under its own weight. We're just lucky enough to have an arc, to have a Galt's Gulch, like a valley that we can escape to. And that also, in effect, acts as an accelerant for the falling apart of society, because the people who technically hold this society together, and this is another big lesson in Ayn Rand's book, is that in our bid to do the right thing, the entrepreneurs, the risk takers, the producers, the people who add value in society, we keep the game perpetuating because the leeches, the parasites, the looters, as she calls them, get to feed off us, off our fucking hard work. So now with Bitcoin, we're able to actually opt out of that and then hopefully accelerate the demise of this decaying clusterfuck of system that we currently live in. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your point. So I don't know if it's a good thing, but I think it's a natural thing, and we are probably accelerating it with the advent of Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, it does. I agree. You know, it's not pretty in the moment, and you know, a lot of unfortunate outcomes will result from these things. But on a macro, I think it's necessary and it's to be expected. And I think, you know, things are playing out probably, you know, quite in line with, you know, the Atlas Shrugged or in the Sovereign Individual. You know, it'll play out somewhat differently. Nobody has a crystal ball, but
Yep.
I think these trends were spotted by these people, and it seems like, you know, something similar is playing out.
Indeed, man. Indeed. I think, man, there's another book that I read called Madness of the Crowds, and it's written by a UK, I think he's a psychologist of some sort. Anyway, he was really good. It reminded me of like reading a Jordan Peterson book. It was solid. And, you know, he talks about, you know, how, you know, identity politics is basically, you know, poisoned not only media, but just general discourse and the general mind viruses that have emerged over the last 10 years. And these things seem to just, you know, the core theme seems to just be victimhood, and it just keeps, you know, penduluming from, you know, one group to another, to another, to another. And like, again, I actually, then this is where I don't believe with the whole, this is where I don't believe in the whole, the entirely centrally planned model of this, like where there's some conspiracy theory behind it all. I actually think a lot of this shit's out of control. I think nobody's got a clue what the fuck's going on, to be honest. You know, and look, there might be, you know, like the cancel-on effect and all that sort of stuff, you know, obviously exists. You know, and there's some people who are probably benefiting from this, but maybe benefiting on the short term. And you know, I mean, game theoretically, maybe it makes sense for them because they're probably, you know, 55, 60 years old, and they know that they can keep leeching off the system for the next 10 years. And, you know, if the shit blows up, well, fuck, so be it. You know, they'll take advantage while they still can.
Yeah, I tend to think people that see everything as some grand conspiracy, it's too simple that way. You know, everything is so complex, and you know, much of what is going on can be explained, like I was referring to earlier, by let's look at our own individual behavior. All right, times your individual behavior, your anger, your waste, your, you know, whatever, everything that you express, whether inwardly or outwardly, times it by 8 billion. What do you get? You get a lot of like big, huge things that provide those things, or that leech off those things, or that amplify those things. You know, it doesn't have to be guys in a room that are just puppeteering everything. I mean, it's far too complex for that. As you say, people at the top are definitely benefiting, you know, in an equal way. And once you have a certain level of power and influence, sure, you can use that to gain more, or to achieve certain ends, or to fund this, or to do that. But so I'm sure that's a part of it, but far less than, you know, the internet conspiracy theorists might have you believe.
Indeed. It's way more chaotic. It's actually, I think, more a function of broad incompetence than anything else.
Right.
and just malaligned base incentives that just morph into these deformed versions of society, which is where we're living now. Like, fucking hell, talk about, we live in the age of dementia, not you know, normal dementia, but like everything's demented. Like, shit just doesn't make fucking sense anymore.
Yeah, well, hopefully the tide is turning, man. We have this, as you say, this arc on our side now, and all we need to do is engage in it and tell people about it. And those who want to get on board can do so, and those who don't have to. So,
Indeed.
Dude, it's always a pleasure. Any last words before we shut this thing down?
Not really, bro. Thank you for having me on. You know, I was really like, me and Zay were actually going to have a chat, but I think, you know, we've covered everything that we needed to cover here. So, you know, that kind of saved it. So I actually enjoyed the three-way, and, you know, you sort of facilitating. So, you know, you're actually one of the best facilitators in this whole space, man. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thanks very much, man.
For
Well,
sure.
look, I hope everything's going well in your undisclosed location. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon, brother. Take care.
100%, man.